Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat, and today we're talking about lands you should be playing but aren't part 2. You guys really loved the first video, so I thought let's go more in depth on lands we should be playing. If you would like to purchase any of these cards, use the link below. It really helps out the channel at no additional cost to you. Starting off, we're playing lands like Meandering River, Azorius Chancery, Tranquil Cove, Coastal Tower, Temple of Enlightenment. You get the point. We are already playing these types of lands. So what lands should we be playing that we could either replace with these or add to our deck so we get more colored sources of mana? In no particular order, let's talk about Mystic Gate. When it enters the battlefield, it doesn't come in tapped, which is awesome. We can tap it for a colorless, or we can pay white or blue to get white, 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 blue, or blue, blue. This is like an advanced version of Sky Cloud Expanse, which it only requires a colorless mana and we can get white and blue, but with Mystic Gate we get the chance of getting 2 white or 2 blue. Adakar Waste. Again, it's similar to Mystic Gate that we can tap it for a colorless, but this time if we do want a white or blue mana, it's going to deal us 1 damage. 1 damage in Commander is nothing. We start with 40 life, so Adakar Waste is a really great land to play. Sea of Clouds. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and we can tap it for a white or blue. This is a great card, especially when this is a game with 4 players. Irrigated Farmland. It's a Plains Island, which is really nice because we can search for it if a certain card allows us to get a Plains or an Island. It does enter the battlefield tapped, and it can tap for a white or blue, and it has cycling just in case we need to draw a card off of this one. Cloudcrest Lake. We can tap for a colorless or we can tap for white or blue, except it doesn't untap during our next untap step. I wouldn't recommend this land unless we can take advantage of untapping it somehow with some crazy cards. Boreal Shelf. It's a snow land. It comes into play tapped and we can tap it for a white or blue. Nimbus Maze. We can tap it for colorless, we can tap it for white if we control an island, and we can tap it for blue if we control a plains. So again, if we meet the requirements, we get this awesome land, but if we don't, we're just going to be only able to tap it for colorless. Wanderwine Hub. When it enters the battlefield, if we reveal a Merfolk from our hand, it won't enter tapped, which is really nice if we're playing Merfolk Tribal, and if not, we still get to tap for white or blue after it's been untapped the next turn. Port Town. It enters the battlefield, we can reveal a plains or an island from our hand, so it could be things, not just basics, but irrigated farmland, and this won't enter tapped, and again it taps for white or blue. Seachrome Coast. If you control 2 or fewer lands, this enters untapped. We can tap it for white or blue. Celestial Colonnade. It enters tapped, taps for white or blue, or if we pay 3 white blue, until end of turn it becomes a 4/4 white blue elemental with flying and vigilance. It's still a land. Last is Glacial Fortress. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a plains or an island. Again, irrigated farmland counts for that. We don't just have to have basics. What's really cool is that we can find these in all the other color pairings. So white and red, white and black, which is really nice. Now onto some different lands. Let's talk about Windbrisk Heights. It has Hideaway, which means when it enters the battlefield, we'll look at the top 4 cards of our library, we'll pick one and put the rest on the bottom of our library. We can tap it for white, or we can pay white and tap it. You may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn. What's great is that this fits perfectly with the theme of white, because white is all about multiple creatures. So it's very likely we're going to attack with 3 or more creatures, and we'll be able to play this card for free. Oseju, Who Shelters All. It's a legendary land. It comes into play tapped, but its effect is really good. We can tap, pay 2 life, add 1 mana to our mana pool. If that mana is spent on an instant or sorcery, that spell can't be countered by spells or abilities. Yeah, you know that WinCon we just cast? It's not going to be able to be countered by spells or abilities. This is an awesome land. Manamo School at Water's Edge. It's a legendary land. We can tap it, add a blue to our mana pool, we can pay a blue to tap it, untap target legendary permanent. This can be our commander or some really great legendary permanent we have. We can also make things legendary permanents with certain cards, so this works as long as it's a legendary permanent. War Room. This isn't getting as much attention as I think it should, but we can tap it for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. Draw a card. Now initially you're probably thinking, why on earth would I pay 3 mana and let's say 3 life to draw a card? Well, there's going to be some turns we're not able to do anything, so paying 3 mana and 3 life to draw a card is actually really good. It's even better if it's a colorless deck. Imagine paying 3 mana, tapping this to draw a card. Or even if it's a monocolor deck. This is one I really think you should be considering. Ancient Ziggurat. We can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, spend this mana only to play creature spells. If we're playing 30 or more creatures, this is a must include. Interlude. This is a great card. It's Command Tower, but for creatures only. Wirewood Lodge. This was recommended in the last video, so I had to bring it up here. We can tap it to add 1 to our mana pool, or we can pay a green and tap it to untap target elf. You're going to find this in a lot of decks that can abuse our elves tapping, like Selvala. She really needs this card in the deck because we can get more card draw off of it. It's a sweet card to have. Soldelvi Excavations. If it would enter the battlefield, sack an untapped island instead. If you do, put it into play. If you don't, put it into its owner's graveyard. We can tap to add a 1 and a blue to our mana pool, or we can pay 1 and tap it. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library. So we can tap it for 1 and a blue, or we can pay 1 and tap it to scry, which is really nice, especially because this is like those other lands that would make us sacrifice an island. I really recommend this card. If you are a 5-color deck, you need to be playing Crystal Quarry. We can tap it to add 1 colorless to our mana pool, or we can pay 5 and tap it to add white, blue, black, red, green to our mana pool. So even if we have 5 white, we can tap this land and get 1 of each color. If you're playing Joda, this is a great card to have. If you're playing mono white, this is the card to have. It's Emiria, the Sky Ruin. Enters the battlefield tapped, but at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, only by controlling 7 or more planes. If you get to 2 or more colors, I think this is really pushing it, and I would not recommend this. Next up is a legendary enchantment, Journey to Eternity. Now, you're probably thinking, why are you showing me an enchantment? Well, actually, the second side of this is Atzil, Cave of Eternity. When we meet the requirement of the enchanted creature dying, we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, or we can pay 3 black and a green, tap it, return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, which is so sweet, especially in these colors, which makes total sense. If you have a lot of creatures dying and you want to bring them back from your graveyard to the battlefield, play this card. Black Bloom Rogue for 2 and a black. You're probably thinking, why are you showing me a creature? Well, this is actually one of those cards where you can use this or the land on the other side, which would just enter tapped and it can tap for black later. This is really sweet, especially in a rogue tribal deck, whenever you might need this rogue now or you might need the land. And Black Bloom Rogue is actually really sweet. It's a 2/3 human rogue with menace, so it's going to be a little bit harder to be blocked, and it gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. So now we can hit for 5, and if we're playing this in our Anawan deck, it's going to be 6 cards that we could be milling our opponent for. Turn Timber Symbiosis for 4 green, green, green. It's a sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a card from among them onto the battlefield if that card has converted mana cost 3 or less and enters the battlefield with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on it. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So it doesn't have to meet that CMC 3 or less, but if it does, we get to buff up that creature. And if we actually need the land instead, it can enter the battlefield untapped if we pay 3 life, and it can tap for 1 green mana. This is a sweet card, and looking at the top 7 of our library is really powerful, and we can get any creature and put it onto the battlefield. So ETB triggers are going to be great, or just if we get that huge creature, this is the card for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, comment below what you think of part 2, and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.